Hey everybody, what's up and welcome back to the channel. Now in this video I'm going to be breaking down my 3 mastery loadouts. If you haven't heard, Kabam has finally given us the feature that we've been asking for literal years, which are mastery loadouts or presets. The way this is going to eventually work is you will have 3 loadouts that you can just save in here, and for the price of 35 units you can swap into them. Now a couple notes on this: your battlegrounds are still a completely different system. The way battlegrounds works, you have to go into the battlegrounds fight screen itself and add a loadout based on your current mastery setup. You've probably already done this in the past. So for battlegrounds, just note nothing is changing. Whatever you've loaded into there, your sort of good offense and defense sort of hybrid, just that stays the same and it's completely independent to this. What this does is throughout the game, it allows you to, for just 35 units, swap into a new mastery setup for your live questing. And also starting on April 10th, one of these is going to be available for Alliance War Defense permanently, which is again just going to be saving so many units. The thing I'm even more excited about is the amount of time it is going to save, because the unit cost is one thing. It was that, taking all the points off and then individually putting them back in, and then maybe you make a mistake and you have to go back and spend even more units. That's happened to me countless times, and that's also going to be gone. So just the amount of time savings and the ease of use of this new system, if everything works appropriately, it's just going to be absolutely great. Now I do apologize, I'm getting over a cold, so my voice doesn't sound so good today, but I'm going to do my best. The way I'm going to structure this video, we're just going to go through my 3 mastery setups. I have a general one for offense, then there's an Alliance War Defense one, and then I'll show you what I do for a recoil setup for specific encounters, specific champs, and for doing large arena grinds if I ever choose to do those. For the most part, I'm going to be just having my Alliance War Defense one set, and I'm going to be using this general one, but it is good to know that for just 35 units, I will be able to go into recoil masteries whenever I want for relatively painless cost of 35 units. And the last thing I'll say is that everything is free for a week. So you really want to be thinking about this, get everything locked and loaded so that once the cost is associated with all this, then you are completely set up and you're ready to go. This is also a really good week to use those carb cores that you may have accrued from those special legends crystals to unlock some new masteries. I did unlock one new mastery, and we'll get into that on my Alliance War Defense. So with that, let's get into it. This is my general setup. We'll see here that I prioritize all the crit rate masteries over courage. I think courage is a good mastery for Alliance War attack, but I have found recently the way I quest is to heal to full, or at least heal above 50%, so I'm really trying my best to not be dipping down there. And even though it is a really good attack benefit, I think having the extra crit rate, crits are just the source of damage for so many champs, and especially in the state of the game, I'm using 6 stars a lot to punch up against 7 stars, and due to challenge rating, the 6 stars feel like they crit less, so having a little bit more raw crit rating never hurts. I'm a big fan of having these at 5 out of 5. I understand how diminishing returns work, but for me it's more bang for buck to have those, and you need to get 15 points to get to the despair tree anyway. So that's how my masteries look there. And then in terms of despair, I always have it at 3 out of 3. I've talked about it a lot, so I don't need to get into it. It essentially makes any champion that has a lot of debuffs have some kind of healing control, which is just so powerful. I really highly encourage everyone to be running Despair. It is such a powerful mastery. Now Deep Wounds, if I had 2 more points available, I would throw them in here as well, because 5 out of 5 is great, but I do find 3 out of 5 is a good compromise. I don't use bleed champions that often, but every once in a while it is nice to have, and it does still add a pretty decent benefit at 3 points. Now my general defense here, you do need a certain amount of points to get to willpower. The way I typically divide that out is 3 out of 3 recovery. Self-explanatory. I think it's still beneficial. It makes your willpower healing a little bit higher. It also will make any general healing go a little bit higher, which is not bad. Block proficiency 4 out of 4 is a necessity in my opinion. You definitely want that. It helps with your parries, but just taking blocked hits in general, it is a pretty substantial benefit in my opinion. And then I need needed 3 more points, so I threw them in Stand Your Ground, which again, even though people look at it as a defensive mastery, it has absolutely saved me on offense as well, because, you know, people throw quick heavies and resisting them is quite nice. So 4 out of 5 is enough to get to willpower. Willpower, just 1 out of 3 for now. I actually don't hate 3 out of 3 because it is a substantial amount more health per second, in my opinion. But, you know, there's only so many points to go around. 1 out of 3, you get most of that benefit. And, you know, anytime there's some kind of debuff on you, like a non-damaging debuff, you can heal back to full still if you're patient enough. And then Inequity, kind of like Despair, I'm a huge fan of this mastery. Again, there's just so many champions that place debuffs, and it gives you more effective health by reducing their attack. So again, if you've never unlocked this, this would be a great time to use those carb cores and unlock this, and really consider adding it to your masteries. You know, if you don't have it for Battlegrounds, it's one of the best Battlegrounds masteries. So, you know, you can make your new loadout number 1 and then go into the Battlegrounds menu and apply it there as well, like I was talking about earlier. So yeah, Inequity, very, very powerful mastery. Can't live without it. That's why it's on here. For proficiencies, again, this kind of looks like my normal one here. Parry, 3 out of 3, because I like not taking a lot of damage on parries. You do want a 3 out of 3. Limber. Now, Limber is a little controversial, right? Because I feel like it seems like a defensive mastery, and the reason I had it there was because this was sort of my catch-all offense and defense in the past. But I will tell you that getting parried by somebody in PvP, when you have Limber going, you basically take no stun, right? And then stuff like encroaching stun and, you know, getting stunned by stuff like in Abyss that happened all the time. So I find that I sometimes really want Limber on, and since we now have this new system where we're toggling between setups, I decided to keep it on. I think it's a really good offensive mastery as well. Happy to argue with you about that, but I do really like Limber. It has saved me in many situations, and I do like it. Now, Petrify is the only other one that's a little out of the norm for me. This basically means that, you know, if you have Despair already kicked in and you parry, then the healing goes slightly into the negative, but more importantly, it reduces the ability and combat power rate during stuns. So this means that when you stun the defender and you hit them a couple times, it gives them less power. They throw fewer specials. In almost all situations, this is going to make fights a little bit easier. You can get to your special before they even throw a special that way, things like that. So I do really highly value Petrify 3 out of 3. And then Mystic Dispersion, I just couldn't imagine my Mystics without it. 5 out of 5, takes a little bit of practice to get used to, especially for some of the champions that, you know, really benefit from it, the power management aspect. But we're seeing more and more Mystics who have sort of like a new way to deal with it, like Spidey Supreme or Kushala. And then we're also seeing stuff like White Tiger and, you know, Diablo had it as well, where like the special 3 bar will blank out so that, you know, you don't accidentally get pushed to the special 3 when you don't want to, and things like that. So, you know, we're seeing a lot of new Mystics come out where Mystic Dispersion is just getting better and better. So I always keep it at 5 out of 5, and that is the end of my general. So now let's go over to number 2. This is my Alliance War defense. So now, I talked about courage before. In this case, I do want courage, because when somebody is fighting my defender, ideally for them at some point my defender's going to get under 50% health, right? So, you know, this is guaranteed to come up. It's guaranteed to have that attack benefit. And then additionally, the crit masteries aren't as important to me, because obviously it's going to hurt if they get hit, whether they get crit or not. Throwing the points in there again is just kind of leading to the despair tree in general. So I did have to put some points somewhere, and I decided to put them in the crit masteries, but as you can see, they're not 5 out of 5. So yeah, that was sort of my big brain move there. Like, courage means they're going to just hit harder at the end of the fight, right? Now, despair, again, 3 out of 3. This just means that, you know, if my defender is placing debuffs, then willpower healing and stuff like that is going to be less. So if they're running recoil or things like that, they're going to be healing for a lot less. I think that's a pretty good benefit. Despair is great on defense as well. Now, deep wounds, you might be wondering, why are there any points there? Well, there are certain nodes like hazard shift, which can benefit from this node. So even if you take an Angela against, bleed, where she reduces the duration, that 1.5 seconds is going to keep ticking after her SIG ability kicks in. So having deep wounds is actually pretty beneficial because bleeds do come up every once in a while, and some champions deal with duration, and this just adds flat duration to it. Again, 5 out of 5 would be pretty OP, but it's such a niche interaction that 3 out of 5 is there just to be annoying enough. Assassin, I put the 1 point in there because let's say you're fighting somebody and you make a big slip up and you get under 18% health. It means all of a sudden your parries may not land, right? And just sort of that instability of knowing that my attacker has more attack and you may fail a parry, it's enough that it might throw somebody. And I think the 1 point is enough there. And then this is the new mastery that I unlocked, Unfazed. Now, I personally hate this mastery because I'm an Elsa Bloodstone player and this really screws her, but I can't deny that it's a great mastery. Anyone with evade, like whether it's Stark Enhanced Spider-Man or Mr. Negative or things like that, the Unfazed is just so annoying and it can allow to them getting clipped. So hey, it's a defense. We want to be annoying. So 3 out of 5 seems like a good place for it for me. Now the defense tree, again, this looks a little different. I took off recovery because, recovery is sort of based on base health and things like that. So I feel like, the 3 points in recovery aren't going to really do much for my defenders because they don't scale with modified attack and things like that. So I actually put the 4 points in, what is this one called? Greater healing or something, greater vitality. It just adds 3.6% health, which doesn't seem like a lot, but if that's just more health that you have to chunk through, it just means the defender's going to last a little longer. I thought that would have a bigger benefit than either of the resistance masteries, like physical and energy resistance don't really do that much. And same thing with the you have stat focus, so you can put points in that for the champions that need it. And then recovery didn't seem that important to me. Block proficiency, still 4 out of 4 because, you are hitting the block of champions quite often, to get them to throw specials and stuff. So you want that block proficiency. And then stand your ground is at 5 out of 5, right? This time we went all the way up just for more annoyance. Willpower, again, good to have. There are some defenders that, it's basically Warlock where you want willpower off. Or what am I talking about? No, there are some defenders that, if you expect, I said that wrong. If you expect them to use Warlock, you want to turn willpower off. But like 9 times out of 10 or like 99 times out of 100, you want willpower on. So, I don't want to be niche for that one interaction when they're fighting with Warlock. So yeah, we have willpower on. And then additionally, here we go, Inequity, right? Now, Inequity is really good on defense. If they're fighting with Kingpin, for example, this is going to affect because his rage debuffs are debuffs. Or like if you have Null placed and then they start with the 15 debuffs, then, that's going to lower their attack. Or like if you place Havoc, right? That Inequity is going to really put in work on defense. So I do highly recommend it as a defensive mastery as well. And then proficiencies, this is just sort of the bare minimum to get 5 out of 5 Mystic Dispersion, which you definitely want on defense. So you'll notice the main compromise here is that parry is only 2 out of 3 because that's the minimum needed. Now you want your defenders to be able to parry, right? Because that is a defensive threat, but it doesn't really matter how long the parry stun is going to last anyway. So, 2 out of 3 is plenty because if they get parried, they're going to get wrecked regardless. So 2 out of 3 is fine. We do keep the Stupefy at 3 out of 3 just for a little bit more duration. This affects all stuns. So if there's some kind of stun in the kit of your defender, like if they throw a special 3 and then you get stunned after, things like that, having Stupefy is pretty good. And I do have a point in dexterity because the AI will occasionally dex a special, and what, just having it there, it can mess you up in a weird situation. So we have the 1 point in dexterity, leading to Mystic Dispersion 5 out of 5. All right, finally, we're going to talk about the recoil tree here. Now, the cool thing about this is in the past, whenever I was swapping to recoil, I would always kind of cut corners to save units. But now that there's a dedicated loadout, I can basically set it up exactly how I've always wanted it to be, which includes stuff like Coagulate. So now going into the offensive tree, the left side looks exactly the same. I've already kind of gone over that. The courage benefit is even less because we have such a big damage boost from the recoil masteries themselves, so even more reason to not be having courage. And then, you know, the recoil is just sort of what you expect. 1 in glass cannon, 1 in recoil, and then 3 in the 2 damage masteries. Now, I do occasionally enjoy a little 3 out of 3 recoil, but you know, you have to make some compromises because this is a loadout, and the benefit of the loadout is you just hit a button, spend 35 units, and you get the mastery set up. There are very, very rare occasions where I want 3 out of 3 recoil. If it was really that important, then I'll just manually set it up myself, and that's fine. But like, you know, for day to day, you don't want 3 out of 3 recoil. And then here's the big change here. Despair, still 3 out of 3. I highly believe in Despair, but in this setup, I go for 5 out of 5 deep wounds, and it's basically for Nick Fury. Basically, like, if I need to be using my rank 5 Nick Fury with recoil on and with deep wounds 5 out of 5, this is going to be my preset. And same thing with Black Cat, like, she really benefits from these masteries as well. And, you know, I just decided this is going to be like a very offense-centric one, so why not, right? So not everybody does that when they run recoil. They figure the attack is enough. But on my specific recoil setup, we are going to have deep wounds 5 out of 5. Now going to the defense tree, this is kind of what I was talking about. The left side looks exactly the same, and I wish that I could have inequity here. But, you know, the whole idea of recoil is that they die before anything bad happens anyway. So, like, I feel like inequity is a little bit more of a control mastery where, like, if you're in a really long fight, you'll be taking less chip damage. In recoil, you know you're going to take a little bit of chip damage anyway. And it's not like inequity will help in terms of, like, mitigating the damage from stuff like double edge. So what I decided to do is the 3 out of 3 willpower, which is kind of essential to negate the liquid courage. And then I do have coagulate 3 out of 3. Like, I do think you want this. It makes it a little bit more versatile for those non-bleed immune champions. And like I said, I normally wouldn't have this on when I swap to recoil, just because, you know, it was just another thing to spend units on speccing it in. I used to, when I swapped back and forth, I just had willpower 3 out of 3, coagulate at 0, and just lived with it, and then swapped my proficiencies in offense tree. But now that we have these loadouts, I am able to use coagulate. I do think it really matters, and it can also save you in some situations where there are bleeds as well. It makes stuff like, you know, Magneto, who is resistant to bleeds, it also shortens the duration, so it kind of like even further eliminates threats and things like that. So I do really like coagulate, and especially for this mastery tree where we can try to be as efficient as possible, I have it at 3 out of 3. And then finally for the proficiencies here, this is the bare minimum, right? There's no mystic dispersion. So, you know, if there was a 4th setup, I might do like a Diablo setup where it's mystic dispersion, you know, and the recoil masteries, but, you know, we can't have our cake and eat it too, right? So because there's so much utility and so much damage in this build, I really kind of skimped here, just did the bare minimum, parry, stupefy, the 1 point in dexterity, and that's it. So anyway, these are my setups. I don't think necessarily they're the best ever, but for me personally, I put a lot of thought into this, and I think they are the best for me and the way I'm playing the game currently. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment on you know, any differences that you have, any suggestions that you might have for other players. I love the discussion in the comments every time we do videos like this. Give it a like, give it a share, and make sure you subscribe. Thanks for checking out this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.